Hey guys, my name's Gloria and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to do a comparison of two recent spooky books that I've read, but first I would like to recommend a small booktuber to you. So the person I want to recommend today is called Silver Rose Books, and she has just recently started her YouTube channel, and she also has a very aesthetically pleasing bookstagram account as well, so you can check that out. From watching her tag videos, she does seem to have a very eclectic reading tastes, but I think she does mainly review YA and fantasy novels, but she's also a filmmaker and a director, so she knows exactly what a good story is, and I just think her videos are fun and very well done, so you should definitely go and check out Silver Rose Books. I shall leave a video of hers up here and her channel down below. Now, I was planning to do a small booktuber recommendation in every one of my videos, and of course I forgot, so I've changed it now to just doing one on Monday. So if I at least film one video with a recommendation in it, I can put it up on Monday instead of having to redo videos and whatnot. Mainly it's just the wigs. It's the wigs that I like to wear. I just couldn't be bothered putting them back on after I've taken them off. Today I want to do a little comparison of two recent books that I have read, both about couples moving into supernatural, weirdly haunted houses, but neither of them are your straightforward kind of haunted house. They're both a bit weird. So the first one, well actually the reason that I wanted to do a comparison in the first place was because I bought The Grip of It by Jemc as part of my big book haul for my birthday, which I will link up here if you want to see what I bought for that. I got a book voucher and I ordered loads of horror, so I bought this one as I've seen so much about it on BookTube and everywhere else, and I started reading it. And initially when I started reading it, I said in one of my videos, I think in that video, that this is a literary horror and I would like my stories to be a little bit literary horror leaning, because I've taken so many classes, I've been in so many groups where it's always literary fiction that's being taught. I'm always the only genre writer there, so I thought that that's the way I wanted to go, and now after reading this, I don't think that it is anymore. There's just some things, I love reading all kinds of genres. I like literary fiction, I like what you can do with it. I think there's a lot of cool things you can do with it, and I've learned a lot from the people I've been around, and I will be implementing that into my own writing. But some of it just, there are some issues with it that just don't gel perfectly with me. And right before I started reading this, I learned of the book Burnt Offerings by Robert Marasco, and it sounded very similar to this, and I learned of it from Paperbacks from Hell. It came out in the early 70s, I think, and while I was reading this, the things that this was falling short on for me, I just kept thinking that Burnt Offerings had those things. It could offer me those things. So I wanted to finish this and read that one, and I thought, why not do a comparison of these two, as they do have so many similarities and they are very different in the style that they're written, so I thought that I would do that today. The Grip of It is a story of Jack and James, written by Jemc. There's just so many J's in this story, and that could be part of the problem as well. But it's the story of James and Julie, and they're having some beginnings of marital issues, as James has a gambling problem, and so far he's only gambled away his savings, but he was starting to dip into their couple savings, and Julie wanted to nip this in the bud. And in order to do this, she had the idea of moving away from the city. You know, if he's not in the city, he can't go to his same old haunts. It just seemed like a good idea to get away from the usual places that he would go gambling and start afresh and try and get away from all of that. So of course they find a great deal, a cheap, fantastic house. This house has so many strange little closets and hidden rooms and places for storage. Lots of things that the realtor can't even point out all of the things to them, and they like the character of the house and they decide to buy it. So they find new jobs, and as soon as they settle into the house they realise that their neighbour from across the street has a habit of staring at them, just sitting in his window glaring into their house, and it's quite annoying in the beginning really. And at one point they go to try and make friends with them and he has absolutely no interest in making friends with them, and they're just not used to this kind of hostility. He seems to be a strange man. There's some history with him and history with his family in the area, and as they stay in the house longer and as they interact with him more and become more annoyed with him, strange things start to happen. So Julie starts seeing huge bruises all over her body that she can't explain. There's also mold on the walls in the house, almost mirroring her bruises. They both start to lose their memories and find themselves in strange places and don't know how they got there or why they're there. James pours water from the tap, and every time he tries to drink it there's mold in the water. It's just a whole lot of strange things. They also find a diary with some bizarre entries in it that seem to be related to the house and the area and possibly their neighbour. So there's strange things happening in this house. They both have to try and deal with this because they've sunk all of their money into it, and they, not only this, it's not just the money that they would be losing, it's also the fact that they don't want to admit that they need outside help. At one point Julie says if they leave they'll have to admit that they can't sort out their problems as one family unit. So that seems to be quite important to her and to the couple as a whole. It is a literary horror. It is told in first person, alternating between Julie and James, with one chapter at the very beginning when they're looking at the house that is told in we. So we looked at the house, we did this, we did that. Grip of it is quite a self-contained and mind-bending story. And Burnt Offerings. So Burnt Offerings by Robert Marasco. It came out just before Stephen King's very famous The Shining, and if you read it you can see so many similarities between the two. I think The Shining is obviously much bigger, it's much more supernatural, there's a bigger force of evil in it, but there are a lot of similarities in it, so it is actually strange when you think about it. When I read it, it was very strange. So Burnt Offerings starts off with Marion, a housewife who is cleaning her house. She's very house proud and she leaves the smell of lemons everywhere she goes because she loves cleaning her apartment so much. She has a young son called David, and she has a husband called Ben, and Ben is a school teacher and it's about to hit the summer months. He has a lot of writing to do because he is supposed to be starting his masters, and they're looking for somewhere to go for a few months just to get out of the city, get out of the noise, get out of the piano teacher downstairs that's always making so much noise during the day, and just the claustrophobia of the city for them. And Marion would love to get away to somewhere nice, somewhere bigger, somewhere that they could just breathe for the summer. This is one of the reasons why it's so close to The Shining, because it's a small family unit of a father, a mother and a son trying to get away for a short period of time to somewhere that isn't their own. They're not going to buy a house or anything, but it is a place that they have to upkeep in the end. The only difference is that they also bring along their Ben's aunt Elizabeth, who is an elderly woman but she's very sprightly. She does lots of things all by herself, but he's her only family, so he thinks they should bring her along just in case something were to happen while they were out of the city. But they go and they see some listings for different places for the summer, and they go and they visit this massive mansion of a house that is in disrepair, but it is fantastic and Marion falls in love with it, and it is owned by the Allardyce or Allardyce siblings, a man and a woman, and they're looking for a family, or a large family, but they do settle for a smaller family obviously, to come into the place, look after it for the summer while they're away. Ben is quite suspicious in the beginning because it is so cheap. It's 900 for, I think it's 2 or 3 months, to live in this massive mansion. But there's just one catch, and that is that their elderly mother is living in the attic, and they would have to bring her meals 3 times a day. They wouldn't see her. She likes to stay in her room. She likes to stay by herself. But they would have to bring her food 3 times a day. And this would be Marian's job, as well as doing some repairs around the house, sort of cleaning up, general things to do, you know. Ben doesn't really want to take this house, but Marian falls absolutely in love with the place, and eventually they do, and they come back, and the longer they spend there, the more obsessed Marian is. Marian the Shining again. She is obsessed with her duty to the house, and it's her responsibility to stay there and to keep the place up and to work for this house. And at the same time, the place is working on Aunt Elizabeth, making her seem more frail and more senile. It's working on the husband Ben because it's making him aggressive towards his son, which he's never been before, which is very strange for him. They want to leave, but Marian can't imagine leaving because this is hers now. This is her job for the summer, and I think it's an enthralling and a gripping story. And just like the grip of it, it's about a house, a place that instead of it being a haunted house, it's more a house that haunts. So the similarities. So obviously it's about a couple who may be having some small issues, but they're not major at the minute, and they're moving for betterment. For Marian and Ben, it's just because they need to get out of the city, they want to spend some quality time together. For James and Julie, it's because of James's gambling problems and trying to fix that and trying to not hide things from each other and be honest with each other again. There's also the issue of they both have a commitment to the properties that they're in. So James and Julie have poured all their money into it. They've bought the house, and in burnt offerings they have agreed to look after this old lady in the attic, so they can't just up and leave her. And Marian also has a duty to keep the place up and keep it clean and keep it working. In both situations, the husband and wife have some resentments towards each other. They both end up keeping secrets from each other, even though they didn't want to do that in the beginning. And there's also the classic isolation. So in burnt offerings, they're isolated on a large estate that is almost choked off from the surrounding area by trees. There's a long lane to it, but eventually, the longer they stay there, the undergrowth grows over and they can't get out as easily. And in the grip of it, they're isolated because of the mystery and the weird things that are happening in the house, and they're so obsessed with this that they cut themselves off from everyone else. And there's also the classic scary old person. So in the grip of it, there's the old man across the street who's just incredibly hostile towards them and glares at them all day. And in burnt offerings, there's the weird old lady that they never see in the attic. The reason that I started to read the grip of it, and there were a few things that I started to notice about not just this, but some of the other literary fiction novels that I've been reading lately, and some of the short story collections as well. There's very little emotion, I feel, in it. I think a lot of it is that a lot of literary fiction is written in first person, and Burnt Offerings is in third person. But the grip of it is in first person, and it alternates between James and Julie, but on occasion, like 3 or 4 times throughout the book, it doesn't do that. So you're expecting the next one to be the husband, but there's 2 chapters of the wife, and because it's in I, and because they seem so similar, it was jarring sometimes to think that, oh no, I'm in the wife's shoes, I'm not in the husband's, because they do have different experiences in the house and their knowledge of things is different. So that was a little bit jarring. I'm gonna read a couple, just a few sentences from each, just to show what I mean by there not being a lot of emotion in it. It felt almost at times, not just in this but in other literary fiction as well, that I was reading like a robot's thoughts. I don't know what it is about you would think that being I did this, I did that, you would be closer to them, there would be more emotion, but for me, when I read these things, it just feels like a robot. So I'm just going to read a few sentences here. I grab a beer with my coworker Sam on my way home from work. He's not a friend I would pick on my own. In the economy of work compatriots, though, he will do. We take turns buying a round each. When Sam says he has to get home to watch the game, I compliment his choice of teams. They're doing well this season, and I'd have bet on them if I hadn't promised Julie I'd stop. He high-fives me and punches my arm again. I will myself not to flinch. I just can't read that without imagining a guy sitting blank-faced in a bar just analysing things, and I think in literary fiction there is a lot of psychoanalysis going on, and maybe that's why it feels robotic to me. But then if you compare that to a passage from Burnt Offerings, this feels like it is brimming with emotion and atmosphere. Ben, if not exactly sanguine, said little more to temper Marian's enthusiasm. There was even something encouraging in his insistence that they set up several houses to visit in addition to the very reasonable one, plainly beyond them, she seemed so inordinately excited about, which Marian did promptly, happily, and displaying an incredible catholicity of taste. No idea what catholicity means. So obviously there are a lot more emotional verbs in that. There's a lot more emotion said in that. But even when speaking of this, or I was reading a Sally Rooney recently, and one of the sentences was, I sat in bed and cried all night long. And it just, in the context of what was happening and everything, everything just felt really emotionless, and everyone was just overanalyzing themselves, overanalyzing other people. There's a lot of, there is some arguments in this book, but there's nowhere near as many arguments as you would expect from a couple who are going through crazy things. There's always just the cold, blatant accusations, and then people either accepting them or walking off. There's nowhere near enough arguments for me. But maybe I'm overanalyzing things. I don't know. So yeah, in the grip of it, I did get a little confused between the husband and wife a lot, because they both have J names. They both sound so similar in their voices, and the chapters aren't exactly, it's not always one or the other, so that really did confuse me. I've noticed a lot in literary fiction, you're supposed to figure out everything yourself, so there's a lot of metaphors, there's a lot of strange imagery going on. This is a literary horror, so you can assume that some of the things are actually happening, though they could just be in this couple's head, who knows, because they're losing their minds or something. But there are strange things. There are children in the trees. And that's all I can really tell you about that, because they're not explained. At different times, James and Julie go out into their back garden by themselves, and they can either see, I don't know if they can actually see the children, but they can hear children just sitting up in the trees talking to each other, and they never once really question it. They never tell anyone else about it. It's just like, oh, there's the weird children laughing in the trees again, and that wasn't explained. The whole issue with the neighbour across the street and their previous family and their connection to the house, it's not fully explained, whereas in Burnt Offerings you end the book knowing pretty much exactly what's going on, why the house is so strange, why the house needed this family to move in, why the Allardyce brother and sister are so strange. But for literary fiction, they just love being very vague, and I think a lot of it is almost intellectual snobbery, in that you're not supposed to patronize your readers or overindulge them or describe things too much. But I think when it's strange things like this, and when it's characters losing time and blacking out and ending up in strange places, and someone does die in the book and you're never sure what actually happened to them or who did it. Was it them in a state of psychosis? Was it a ghost? Was it... who knows? And I just... some things can be left as mysteries. Some things are a lot more interesting when they're mysterious, but I don't know what happened in this book. I don't know exactly why the house was haunting them, why Julie had bruises, why there was mold in the water. It's not fully explained. So I think for a lot of reasons I did enjoy this book. I learned a lot from the writing in it. There are some great imagery in it, great prose. But I think I preferred Burnt Offerings. Burnt Offerings is full of character. It's full of very likeable characters. Ben, the dad, is lovable. His Aunt Elizabeth is hilarious. I did like Marion as well. I watched the movie. The movie is almost identical to the book, although Marion is just a complete wet blanket in the entire movie. The dad and the other characters are great, but Marion in the movie is just a brick wall. But I did enjoy Jack Jemc's, that's a difficult name, the grip of it, but I think I definitely enjoyed Burnt Offerings better. So that is my comparison of The Grip of It by Jack Jemc and Burnt Offerings by Robert Marasco. If you're interested in reading some new literary horror, I would say pick up The Grip of It. It is very interesting. And if you really like haunted houses and strange properties and stuff, if you really like The Shining, I would say pick up Burnt Offerings by Robert Marasco, because I think you'll really enjoy it. So that is my comparison of those two books. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for liking and subscribing if you have done that. If you like what I'm doing here, you can also like and subscribe down below and help me reach my goals for the year. Don't forget to check out Silver Rose Books and her great videos. And I hope everyone's staying safe out there, and I hope you had a great Pride Month, and I shall see you in the next video.